Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air, live or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or download our own WHPC app and hear all the award-winning shows from WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living, and we have been bringing you this show right here on WHPC since 1990. Today, our guest is Dr. Michael Grosso. Dr. Grosso earned his doctorate in philosophy from Columbia University and has taught at City University of New York, Kennedy University in California, and City University of New Jersey. And he is the author of several books, including The Yoga of Sound and Smile of the Universe. And today he is joining us. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Grosso.
I'm delighted to be here.
Now, I happen to have a copy of your beautiful new book. I love the cover. It's called The Yoga of Sound, The Life and Teachings of the Celestial Songman. And you can tell us who this person is, Swami Nada Brahmananda.
Well, he's probably, or was, the last master of vibration or sound yoga. And when I met him back in the late 70s, he was on a world trip and basically teaching and also performing. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, and I decided to take lessons with him, less to learn music, but more to learn about his philosophy. On the other hand, it is a philosophy of music. And I myself am interested in music. And I should also say that what he meant by music was all of the arts. But music in particular is perhaps the most powerful of the arts because it takes hold of our whole being. When we listen with our body. Even the air around us is vibrating when we're making music. And music combines thought, feeling, and the body all together. And I think that's one of the reasons why music is such a powerful and universally attractive art form, but it also has implications for our health and our spiritual well-being. And Swaminatha Brahmananda was just a wonderful gift that I experienced by chance in New York City at a time when, at that point in New York City where I was living, it was a down period for the city. There had been all kinds of mishaps and problems, but here was this
sort of like today, huh?
Yeah, well, today is much worse, I'm afraid. But, I mean, with the climate catastrophe looming, and we're under a time pressure to change the way we live on planet Earth, and we've got about 10 years before enormous problems really confront us. But yes, it is like today.
Well, your book is just lovely, and you have a picture of Swami, who was understudy by the Government of India Medical Institute, where he performed many different feats. You have a picture of him drumming. What does this mean? On one breath in an airtight chamber for 35 minutes. What does that mean?
Right. It took him months to train himself, and he actually went into an underground pit in complete darkness for 108 days. To acquire this particular skill by means of practice. And essentially what he did and learned to do, and he used to do it every day at 3 o'clock in the morning when he would wake up, is take one breath. And what you saw in that photograph is where he was being tested to be sure that he really did hold his breath for 35 minutes. It's a world record as far as I know. And on one breath, he would be staring at an icon of Shiva to keep his mind more focused. And he would play the tabla, and he always seemed to emphasize the fact that he'd never even blinked for 35 minutes. He had total control over his body. I watched him perform this in public once without the cage, as it were, to prove that he was on one breath. And he only lasted 27 minutes, and he apologized to me after it was over because he caught his breath in the wrong way, and there he had a whole audience waiting for him to perform. So he did it. And it was pretty astonishing to hold your breath and perform musically, continuously and brilliantly for, I think he did it 27 minutes. But
that's pretty good. Well, he was actually, it's a pretty vigorous thing to play tablas.
Absolutely. I mean, and he's quite, the people who met him in the Western world, and there are all kinds of scientists, both in the Eastern and in the Western world, especially in America, who studied him, and I talk about this in my book, were completely amazed. And they called him like an Übermensch, a Superman. I mean, and yet he was nothing like a Germanic Superman, as it were. He was a very gentle, loving, and funny man. I had actually dreamt of him before I met him. And he told me in the dream that there were going to be no instruments. And I woke up thinking, who is this person that I've just dreamt of who's going to teach me music without any instruments? And about a couple of weeks later, through a friend, I met the Swami.
Oh, so you had a prophetic dream.
I did.
Beforehand. But were you studying that kind of philosophy, like Indian philosophy or anything about like Nada yoga and, sound healing in general? Like, I'm wondering what might have brought that to you.
Well, I've always been interested in Indian philosophy ever since I walked into a Vedanta society in New York City on 71st Street when I was about 18 years old. And I looked on the wall, and it said, the first thing I read was, truth is one. Human beings call it by different names. And I said to myself, wow, that's what I believe. And I was, in a sense, since that day, I've been a student of the Upanishads and all forms of Indian philosophy. And but it was only at that point in the late 70s that I got connected with the musical dimensions of Indian philosophy. And since that time, I've been practicing in my own way. I'm not an expert on Indian music, but the basics of all music, of all the muses, of all the different art forms, is something that I learned the essence of it from Nada Brahmananda. It's all about rhythm and tuning into the mysteries of our own bodies, for that matter. But anyway, that's a quick rundown on how I met the man and what he has come to mean to me.
And you have a lot of really interesting names to your chapters in your book, and we're going to just reintroduce you at this point to our listeners. So, listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And this is the Natural Nurse here with another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And our guest today is Dr. Michael Grosso, that's Grosso, and we're talking about his book, The Yoga of Sound. Really interesting. Now, may I call you Michael?
Of course.
So you have some great chapter names in this book. Like, what does this mean? Silence at the center of the drum.
Well, that was just came from a lesson in drumming, and he explained to me that there is a point in the drum when you tap it, it gives out no sound, and that he construed as a kind of an excuse to make a philosophical point that at the bottom of even all the great music that we perform is a kind of a silence, a divine void. You know, the symbol of the void is a radically important symbol in much of Eastern philosophy. And all it really means is nothing that esoteric about the notion of the void or emptiness, but the idea of emptying the mind, you see, so that we can when we can empty our own minds of the daily concerns and preoccupations, then we make room, as it were, for the influx of higher forms of consciousness. Music is one of the most powerful ways to accomplish that feat, especially when the music is Indian music that's explicitly spiritual, although we could say the same for all kinds of music. Personally, I believe that all forms of music are expressive and means and ways in which we can tune into the deeper elements of our being. I've never listened to any type of music that I could not tune into. Of course, I like some things more than others, right? But that goes without saying. But the essence of music, the rhythmic structure, and the way that music immobilizes our emotions, our mind, because we have to be clear and mentally and be able to count and feel the rhythms. Well, music grabs most of our whole being. I'm also a painter, and I have to say that when I paint, I always have the music on because it adds to the sense of the vibe. The creative vibe is enhanced when I have music in the background and while I'm sitting at my easel painting.
So wait a minute. So when you're saying sitting at your easel, so that must mean you're also an artist also.
Yes, I am. And I also play the flute, and I'm into drumming, but in a very personal way. I think you don't have to be, you can, let's say, put it this way, Nada Brahmananda taught me how to appreciate the music of life itself. Of course, an instrument is a powerful tool, but the point is that wherever there is rhythm, wherever there is an option to be harmonic in the way we live, it could be the way we feed ourselves, the way we relate to other human beings. The underlying ideal is harmony, to bring things together in harmonious ways. And what I learned from Swami Nada Brahmananda was that every moment of our lives is an opportunity to create music, to create harmony out of wherever we are and whatever we're doing. And that's the great lesson that I got from him and that I try to convey to readers in writing my book.
Now, when you spend physical time with him, was it in this country or in India?
No, I met him in New York City in the late 1970s, and he was on a world traveling trip. And
so that was kind of the time we had a lot of gurus here. Because
we did.
I met Satchidananda at that time because he was bringing meditation, his style of meditation, all over the country right at that time as well. That's when I visited with him.
Absolutely. That was a very, and also in New York City, where I was living in the late 70s, you may remember, or particularly 1977, was a very bad year for the city. I mean, it was, and yet it was a period in which a lot of contemporary music in America, types of musical style were born in New York City, right in the middle of all of the problems that people were facing in New York City. There were groups all over the city getting into forms of music that have become more popular today. It wasn't the kind of music that I was into, but it was music. And it's all part of the great idea of Nada Brahmananda's about the muses and the cosmic nature of music itself. And if we really want to understand Nada Brahmananda, we have to go back and look at Pythagoras, the ancient Greek philosopher who actually discovered the mathematics of scales. And his idea of music as a way of life is very close to what I discovered on my own in the late 1970s in New York City with Nada Brahmananda. And music is not just entertainment. It is, but it's more than that. It's a form of spiritual practice.
Well, some people may notice that when we talk about many of these teachers, their names use the word Ananda. You know, if you're talking about this gentleman that you're talking about, or I just mentioned someone else, Satchidananda, etc. So what is Ananda?
Oh, well, that is, as far as I know, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. I would like to learn the language, but Ananda, as far as I know, means bliss. So Nada Brahmananda's name, he once told me this, my name, he said, is bliss through music. And it's just curious that these names repeat themselves in various forms, but the underlying idea about Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda, is a term, an Indian term, which summarizes the whole essence of Indian philosophy. Sat meaning being, Chit meaning consciousness, and Ananda being bliss. What more simple and more wonderful message to convey to the world than to say that just to be conscious, to be properly conscious, is to be inherently blissful. The reason we're not feeling blissful all of the time is because our consciousness is caught up in all kinds of, worldly concerns, fears, anxiety, appetites, desires, and so forth. But, and here's again the spiritual and the practical and the disciplined part of being a musician for Nada Brahmananda, one has to learn to gain the full benefit of the divine music latent within all of us. We have to sort of moderate our lifestyles a little bit. And if you're not a Brahmananda, a lot. But even an ordinary person like myself can profit by attempting to meditate on a regular basis, take care of the body in such a way that we're not letting it dominate us or get in the way of the higher forms of consciousness, the fuller life that we could be leading. But we can all do something about enhancing our lives in a creative way by means of one shape or form of music. And again, by music, I mean to refer to the muses, to all of the art forms, whether it be dance or painting. All of the art forms engage the imagination, the soul, and the senses, the part that keeps us in the world and related to the people around us. So we need to get to the basic part of our mental life and enrich it and purify it in order to enjoy the music of life itself.
Well, one thing you share, and again, we are talking today with Dr. Michael Grosso. It's Grosso, and you can find him at Conscious Unbound Blogstock or paintingtheparanormal.org. That's another place you have, I imagine, your artwork. And Facebook.com, Michael.Grosso. And of course, all the links will be on our intro page to the show, which you can always visit again on the archives. But one thing that you shared that this guru mentioned to you is he said, mind control is life. What does that mean?
Well, think about it. It is all of the things that we do. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. That is a quotation from Buddha, the opening line of the Dhammapada. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. So if you wake up in the morning and you're angry because something happened to you last night, and you're already disposed toward negativity in the infinite variety of forms that negativity can assume. So the whole notion of mind control, observe oneself, observe yourself, not you particularly. And it's always some slip up, screw up in our attitude, or we've allowed ourselves to lapse into a feeling of anger or jealousy or fear or anxiety or whatever. And then there are consequences. So how do we learn how to control our mental life? Well, we all know that meditation is one thing, but what's unique about Nada Brahmananda was that he emphasized music as the best form of meditation. Why? Because music grabs your whole body and your whole emotions, as I said earlier in my opening remarks. Whereas to sit down and repeat a mantra, not a bad thing to do, but he used to...
Well, wait. Let's define that word, because you and I are talking, and we both know what a mantra is.
Right.
But we may have listeners here on our radio show here that may not know. So tell us what a mantra is.
A mantra is anything that you repeat, a mental phrase, an idea, a prayer, but anything that you mentally repeat in order to quiet down the random activity of the mind. And it could be anything. It could be music. It could be, with me, it's art. When I'm in front of that easel, I'm in another planet. I'm out of this world. But it could be a prayer. It could be while you're cooking breakfast for yourself or for your family or something. Anything that requires you to focus your attention and to be in command of your inner life is going to be a help toward opening yourself up to the deeper and richer realms of our consciousness. So that's all that is at the bottom, what that statement is about, and it applies to every moment of our existence, the stressful ones, as well as the casual moments of our experience. That the option is always there to deepen the awareness, to enrich our consciousness. We're free to do that, but we have to remind ourselves regularly that we are free to shape our own mental life. And nothing...
Also, in the yoga of sound, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about, because here we talk a lot about natural therapies, herbal medicine. Of course, in India, Ayurveda is one of the most ancient teachings, and a lot of these kinds of techniques, like quieting the mind, is really vastly interwoven into all the teachings of the Ayurvedic sciences. Mm-hmm. But how did Swami discuss the health benefits of these kinds of actions with calming the mind and mind control, basically, through spending some time with focus?
Well, I'm not quite sure about it. I mean, how does it work?
Basically, what was his teachings about the health effects?
Yeah, well, again, the health effects come from two things. One, diet and the way you live. Okay, he was constantly kind of teasing me about how do I live? Stay away from naked women and don't get drunk too often and all that. So how you live is one thing, but for Nada Brahmananda, clearly some form of sadhana. This is the biggest lesson I got out of Nada Brahmananda. You need some form of practice, and I love the Indian word sadhana, which simply means spiritual practice. And I think that if there's one lesson that I got from working with Nada, and one lesson that I would impart to anyone interested in these ideas, is that we need to discover or find something that we do that can serve as a practice for tuning in to the deeper levels of our mind and from acquiring mastery over our bodies. But it doesn't just happen by thinking about it. You need a practice. And, whether it be meditation, playing an instrument, whether you make just cleaning your own house every day, which I do, by the way. I live by myself. And I make I try to keep an orderly house. I have millions of books and papers all over the place. So it's a kind of a meditation that I apply to everyday living. And I try to remind myself that whatever I'm doing, even if I go out shopping, I have to buy some food for the week. That too affords me numerous opportunities to distill my awareness and respond to things in a way that is, let's say, enriching rather than self-defeating. It's so easy to lapse into habits, thoughtless habits in one's lifestyle that are self-defeating rather than self-enhancing. And I think we need to remind ourselves that we are free to choose the way we want to shape our lives. And we do it by adopting some philosophy and some practices that will get us there, and not just, a meandering thought. Wouldn't it be nice if I were more, let's say, self-controlled or more tuned into things and less anxious, et cetera, et cetera. You get there through practice. And in that sense, all of the arts are options for enlightenment, or pathways to enhance our lives and the lives of other people around us, because as we evolve, we hopefully benefit others around us at the same time.
Yes, and there are other spiritual teachings like that. Even there was a TV show where the master would always have the student wash the car. And that seems like you're talking about a mundane practice, but he did it as a lesson in elevating the consciousness.
Exactly. It's just a conscious awareness. I'm going to, at this moment, take hold of myself and point everything about my being, even the way I breathe, the way I look around at the world, the way my eyes alight upon objects, whatever I do and whatever I feel, I'm going to oversee the process in a way that makes it more interesting and more creative, and in the final analysis, healthy.
I want to thank you, listeners, for joining us once again right here on Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information about Dr. Grosso, just look him up, Michael Grosso. For further information, email us, whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.